DARPA again, which is the military wing of these exploration, and we have editing soldiers' DNA, a new type of super soldier. They get $2 billion a year to experiment with GMO, but not just genetically modified food. They're dealing with genetically modified viruses to insert into soldiers to suddenly change the DNA and create super soldiers that eliminate their empathy, so that basically creating killing machines. You look at Joel and some of these prophecies in the Bible about what's coming, and it's amazing to see all of this come into focus. And I want you to understand, and we're going to see it here in a minute, that God says when the world gathers together, God created division in this world for a reason, because man is arrogant. And when man messes with devils and he comes together, what happens is he begins to do things that are not permissible. And he begins to follow these devils and follow this genetic manipulation, and God has to destroy everything. So we are at the brink of technology and scientific ability to mix animal parts with human parts, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It really is. Why don't we begin in 1 Timothy chapter 4? Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to what? Seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Where did this information come from? Devils. Look at 2 Timothy 3. But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse. That means each year the deception grows. Deceiving and being deceived. Jesus says in Matthew 24, there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders. Do you see that? Great signs and wonders. Insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. And he says in Luke 21, great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. Read that again, because sometimes you read these things and it's not sinking in what it's saying. The Lord's saying before His second coming, there will be fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. Do you see that? It's getting impossible to even keep a list of all the strange lights and things. It's getting so open now that you just click on CNN and it's like, look what they discovered in Missouri. Look what they discovered here. And it shows the light jumping all around and doing crazy things. And now it's the report. You're not just hearing a story about it. They're putting them online. Everywhere, every day, all around the world, these things are being reported. I don't know what they are, but I do understand that we're living in very, very dangerous times. Do you understand that? Do you know that in the days of Noah there was a rise, an increase in demonic activity? And Jesus says before His second coming, it will be just like in the days of Noah. At the first coming, there was an increase of demonic manifestations. And when you put the fact that we are now at the door of the second coming, we should expect the same type of demonic activity that we saw at the first coming. And then Jesus says it'll be just as in the days of Noah. And you go back to the days of Noah and you find out that the sons of God were leaving their place and having contact with man in unspeakable, unmentionable ways. And you understand that we are at the door of all of that right now. I want you to know there'll be two types of deception. There will be evil men and seducers that will use trickery, staged events. But listen, don't forget this. I'm not speaking to atheists right now. I hope you're a Bible believer. which means that you cannot go with the crowd. Let them bang their head to AC/DC and talk about... I'm telling you something. As a Christian, you need to wake up and get in the Bible and understand that we are the light. We have the understanding. And you go beyond simple understanding conspiracy. You can go to the heart of this thing and understand what's happening. I am not denying that there are staged events and evil men and seducers, because the Bible says that this will occur. But you better listen now. There's another type of deception. And this deception is when there is satanic power that is supernatural. And that power is manifested before the eyes of men, either through the devil's agents themselves, or through devils, or by Satan himself. And because of those manifestations, you get sucked in to the movement, whatever it is. We're in a strange place as Bible-believing Christians. We really are. Because we know there will be deceit and trickery and deception by the use of technology and holograms and all of these things, coupled with the propaganda behind it. But we're not materialists, are we? We're not materialists. I can open up the book of Job and realize that Satan got permission from Job, but he could only go so far. God has Satan, and He says you can only go so far. But Satan was able to control the weather. He was able to control men. He was able to bring about death, events, destruction, chaos, even physical boils on Job's body. Now let me ask you a question. When you open up the book of Job a long time ago, was that a government conspiracy? Answer me. What was it? Supernatural satanic power. Do you think the devil got in a spaceship and took off some other way on the other side of the universe and he has no interest right now? No, the devil's alive and well on Earth. Do you understand that? He never left. His activity is increasing. Do you know the devil can perform signs and wonders, and he's not limited to GMO, genetic manipulation, and holograms, and DARPA. He's not He's not limited to any of these things. Do you understand? Do you know the devil can empower men to do things that are supernatural? Do you know the Bible said in the last days there will be men that will be empowered to actually do satanic wonders before the eyes of men? Look at 2 Timothy 3. Before you even look at the false prophet and the Antichrist and the miracles that they deceive the whole world by, and the whole world begins to worship the dragon. And who is the dragon? Satan. Look at 2 Timothy 3. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Well, those are the same days Paul said that seducing spirits and doctrines of devils will be manifest. Now look at what he says, verse 8. Don't miss this now. Now as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds reprobate concerning the faith. Now you go back and read about the magicians, Jannes and Jambres, who were in the book of Exodus, withstood Moses. Do you understand that whatever miracles Moses did by God's power, the magicians could do by sorcery and enchantment? But do you understand they could only go so far? When you put God's power up against Satan's power, the devil was not able to duplicate every single miracle. He came short. That's how you know satanic power. It will always come short of God's power. But do you understand that whatever miracles that Moses was able to perform, just about every one of them, those magicians used magic, and it wasn't deception. They actually caused supernatural wonders to occur to try to keep people from discovering the true God. So why in the last days will the devil use satanic power? To try to keep people blind from discovering God. And that's exactly what the Bible says will occur. Now, with this in your mind, let's take a look at some history. We've mentioned the days of Jesus and the demonic power that was manifested. Now, do you remember that the Lord warned that Israel was going to be destroyed and that Jerusalem would be attacked? And remember in AD 70, after Jesus had resurrected and gone to heaven, you had this horrible war where the Romans came in, and it was one of the worst wars in all of history, at least for the Jewish people. And do you understand that all of that was a picture of a future temple to be built in the land of Israel? And prophecy scholars for centuries have said one day the nation of Israel will exist in unbelief, and they will begin to build their temple, and they're going to be attacked by all nations, just like you saw in AD 70 under the one world government at the time, which was the Roman Empire. But this is what I want to share with you, and this is very important. Do you realize that when Jesus said there will be great signs and fearful sights in heaven, do you understand it was a double prophecy? So much that Jesus said would happen, happened in AD 70, that there is a whole movement today called preterism that says the second coming of Jesus already happened back in AD 70. Well, no, that's not true. But many times the Bible can give you an example of what's going to happen later. So in AD 70, you saw the attack of Jerusalem, you saw the attack of the Jews, and you saw fearful sights from heaven, and all of that was just a little picture of what our day, or what the future tribulation period will be like. Now, I want you to notice something that you might not be aware of. Josephus was a historian at the time, and he wrote Jewish Wars, and listen to what he says. A certain incredible phenomena appeared. Well, Jesus said it would appear, didn't He? I suppose the account of it would seem to be a fable. He says, I admit, I'm almost embarrassed to have to tell you this happened because I know you're not going to believe me. Were it not related by those that saw it, and were not the events that followed it of so considerable a nature as to deserve such signals? What happened after this strange phenomena? The Jews were destroyed in the greatest bloodshed. There's a worse time coming, but it was one of the most horrible wars upon the Jewish people ever in history. And listen, before sunsetting, says Josephus, chariots and troops of soldiers in their armor were seen running about among the clouds and surrounding of cities. Now, Jesus said there would be what in the sky? What type of signs? Fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. And people would look up and see chariots running through the sky. Chariots. UFOs. And they would say, what do these things mean? What is all of this? What does it mean? What did it mean? Aside from what the devil wanted to do, what did it mean? It meant that Israel was about to be destroyed, and it was a horrible time coming, and that you better get out of town. Now let me ask you a question. How do you explain that? You might say, well, Josephus is just wrong because all of these people that he interviewed that saw it, it must have been like a military program or something. Was it? No, it wasn't. It's not just Josephus. Let's look at another historian at the time. Tacitus, in his histories, says, in the sky appeared a vision of armies in conflict, of glittering armor. A sudden lightning flash from the clouds lit up the temple. The doors of the holy place abruptly opened. Only a few people placed a sinister interpretation upon this. The majority of the Jews and others that saw it, what did they say? They said it must mean good times are coming. But a few of them said, no, these signs are sinister. It means bad times are coming. So one thing we learn already is that signs in the sky often speak of judgments to come. Whether they are caused by angels, whether they're caused by the devils themselves, or whatever the cause or original source, it's not a good sign. So when I see over and over again, sometimes people are just mistaken in what they see. Sometimes it might be a government program. Sometimes it might be supernatural. And the more these things increase, the more I realize this isn't good. This isn't good. It's not going to be good for America. It wasn't good for Israel when they saw the fearful sights in the sky. It's not good for America. Now let me share a few more things with you in history. I want you to see, D.M. Patton in 1925 in his Dawn magazine says, a flaming comet is said to have overhung Jerusalem for a year before its destruction. So this is something else we didn't read about right there in the quote by Josephus. But Josephus says, the Jews have neither eyes nor ears for the signs of ruin. As, for example, the comet in the form of a sword that hung over Jerusalem for a whole year altogether right before its destruction. So Josephus said, not only did they see chariots running in the sky, but there was this strange comet that just hovered above Jerusalem for a year. And everybody's writing about it. They said, what is that strange light? And it just stood up there for a whole year. And when it disappeared, here came the Roman army and just obliterated everybody that didn't get out of town. Because Jesus said, you better head to the mountains. Jesus said, when you start seeing these things, you better head to the mountains. But D.M. Patton continues. He said, it is greatly remarkable that the Great Plague in 1664, the greatest known for thousands of years, and also the Great Fire of London in 1666 were both preceded by comets so close to the events that even the wiser, said Richard Proctor, were struck by the coincidence and so could scarcely regard it as accidental. So there were many people that are very skeptical folks, but they said it's awful strange that these comets came, these signs in the heaven came right before these horrible calamities. In 1639, the first UFO was seen in the New England colonies. UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object, which simply means they don't know what it is. So they saw something in the sky, they didn't know what it was, and it was in 1639 in Boston. John Winthrop's journal at the time, he says, in this year, 1639, one James Everill, a sober, discreet man, he wasn't a drunk, and two others saw a great light in the night at the Muddy River in Boston. When it stood still, it flamed up and was about 3 yards square. When it ran, it was contracted into the figure of a swine. It ran as swift as an arrow. For about 2 or 3 hours, they found themselves carried quite back against the tide to the place they came from. Divers other credible persons saw the same light after about the same place. Now, if you think that's something, you go on to read about those early preachers and how they documented all the strange things that were occurring. That was just the start of it. They continued and they continued to where you had children levitating. You had children's chairs coming up off the ground, and they were trying to hold the chair down. And you look at all those reports from credible witnesses, and you look at the Salem witch trials, and you think those people were a bunch of fanatics. They were just crazy. And there are people at the time that wrote books saying, I don't agree with what those judges did. They were wrong. But I'm telling you, in case you think they were just a bunch of crazy people, there were supernatural things that you could not explain coming and happening at that time. What did all of those things? Number one, the people were messing around with the occult like never before in history. And as they began to mess around with the occult, these manifestations began to happen. And in my book, Not the End of the World, I document the history of how the people had turned to magic, and it ended up with the Salem witch trials, and many good people were executed. You got to understand, those judges at the time used witchcraft to try to find out who's guilty. They would take a devil-possessed person, and they'd say, "What do you see?" And they'd say, "I see an astral shape. I see a ghost hovering over that person. He's the guilty one." And then they would go execute that person. Is that right? No. So what does all of this mean? It means that when people begin to mess around with the occult, bad things occur. And what's happening now with this Harry Potter generation? Folks, I'm telling you, you better get right with the Lord Jesus Christ. You better get right with the Lord Jesus Christ. Life magazine tells us about Swedenborg. You might not have ever heard the name Swedenborg, but much of what you see today has been influenced by him and his demonic writings. Remember that it says that they'll turn to doctrines of devils? Swedenborg was a devil-possessed person that influenced much. And when you go to school, they don't really show you Swedenborg, but they show you many of his followers, and you learn about all these people, but you don't know they're disciples of Swedenborg. See, that's the little trick that they show you in humanistic school. But Life magazine in 1956 says in 1758, the Swedish mystic Swedenborg reported he had talked to what? Martians. So I'm telling you, and I want you to understand it, playing around with UFOs and aliens, you might as well play with a Ouija board. There's no difference. Right here from this person's mouth, Swedenborg believed that he was talking to Martians. I don't care whether you think it's your dead Aunt Betsy or whether you think it's somebody from Venus or somebody from Mars. If you attempt to talk to them, that is divination, that is occultism, and you will end up with devil oppression at the very least. In 1835, in the New York Sun, Richard Adams Locke, supposedly, wrote an elaborate story. And I read the story, I read the articles, and you would not believe how elaborate this was. He's quoting the famous astronomers at the time. He's using technical language, but he shocked the world. He began his whole series of articles by saying, a supplement to the Edinburgh Journal of Science. What does that sound like? It sounds professional, doesn't it? And he began to say that the famous astronomer has this telescope, and the technology is so great that for the first time he was able to look and see the moon in a way he never saw it before. And he goes through pages and pages quoting these expert testimonies and said basically there's people on the moon, and it's some type of genetic manipulation because you have giant beavers without tails that are walking around, and you've got winged humanoids, and you've got all of these perverted monstrosities. And you know what happened? People from across America, listen to me, and around the world went crazy. And they said, we've discovered life on the moon. And they believed it. And whoever this was in the newspaper, because the newspaper really never denied it, they just continued to play with it. And for weeks they kept the people under this deception. So that many throughout the world said, this is true, this is true. We found life on the moon. Now you might wink at that today. You might laugh at that and say, how could those people have been so deceived? Do you understand how elaborate this hoax was? The people that they quoted, the scientific terminology. What did this prove? That if you quote enough experts and use a means that people already see as authoritative, you can deceive people and make them think that we've been visited by aliens. 1835. Maybe something else was going on. Maybe some type of group of Masons were behind this. You say, well, why would they want to make people, why would they want to go through this type of testing? Well, maybe if you go up to 1887, you'll have an answer. H.P. Blavatsky published Isis Unveiled. She was the editor of Lucifer magazine. And Blavatsky taught that souls pass from planet to planet in continuous evolution. So she claimed that those aliens that are out there supposedly are really evolved humans. And then she said, I'm in touch with them. And they told me to cut my hair and wear pants and that the kingdom of God will come. when women begin to renounce the dress of their sex and begin to change, they begin to say that there's going to be a great change coming. They begin to say all of what's happening in America today. And guess what? The Harry Potter generation. When you read J.K. Rowling, don't read it, it's a bunch of trash, but this whole generation is deceived by it. And it's all out of, Conan the Barbarian. You wouldn't believe how much in science fiction in these movies has come from H.P. Blavatsky. So really what I'm telling you is this. Belief in aliens and trying to get in touch with them is satanic. Do you understand? It's from the heart of Satanism. Well, everything continued with these writings of Blavatsky until H.G. Wells published The War of the Worlds in 1897. Wonder what that's about. Well, he said Martians are evolved beings. All they are is humans or whatever they are. They're planets where evolution has continued. And there are these beings that are grayish with disc-like eyes. See the modern Martian that you see that people put in these movies like a gray snake. H.G. Wells says there's green smoke all around them. Now, to connect all of this with Blavatsky and Harry Potter supposedly a wizard messing around with magic. And everywhere you go, his eyes are green. The color green is associated with everything Harry Potter does. So you're starting to see the connection. All throughout H.G. Wells' books, the number 11, it's always 11 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Why 11 o'clock? Why the number 11 over and over again? The Masons say that's one of our chief numbers. And then you look at Harry Potter, everything's associated with Harry Potter is 11, 11, 11, 11. And so basically this is right out of the occult. So they're basically saying that Martians have invaded the world. This is what his book's about. And they bring, listen to me, flaming death to people by an invisible light. They look at people and they're just evaporated. They see a light and then somebody is evaporated. And all around the world, people are, or at least in this place where the Martians invaded, they're getting evaporated. Then the soldiers of the government declare martial law. And they march into the houses and they say, you must leave your house. You must leave your house. And they begin to control everyone and herd them where they want to go. Oh, but it gets very interesting. A Christian preacher shows up in the book. And the Christian preacher says, why are these things permitted? What sins have we done? The church is gone. The smoke of a burning goeth up forever and ever. This is the end, the great and terrible day of the Lord. Think, what is H.G. Wells doing? Oh, you find out a few pages later. They declare the preacher insane. And the preacher is shouting insanity in the face of the Martian invasion because he thinks it's a judgment from God because he still believes in God. So what ends up happening is he keeps quoting the book of Revelation till all of a sudden the Martians come after him, and because of his delusion, he's one of the ones that get evaporated. It was very brutal. So that many people at the time said, this is so violent. Whatever you're trying to do with your story, it's just very brutal and violent. But Wikipedia, just to give you an example, this is pretty mainstream. Wikipedia says an insane clergyman is a key character in the novel. His attempts to relate the invasion to some kind of biblical enactment of Armageddon seem only to reinforce his mental derangement. His death as a result of his evangelical outbursts and ravings attracting the attention of the Martians appeared to be an indictment of his outdated religious attitudes, making him a candidate for culling by natural selection at the hands of the superior evolved Martians. I hope you paid attention to what this just said. H.G. Wells' book, The War of the Worlds, was about we have to get rid of outdated ideas that come from the Bible. And we're going to have a great invasion that's coming. And during this invasion, we're going to have the next step of evolution is going to take place. And those that are going to die are those with these outmoded, dangerous, outdated ideas. He said, "Do you really think that H.G. Wells had something like that in mind? Maybe the green and the number 11 and the Martians and all of the connection to Blavatsky, maybe all of that's just a coincidence. Really? Well, you ought to read the other books that H.G. Wells wrote. Who is this man, H.G. Wells? Well, he wrote his book, Open Conspiracy, in 1926. And he said, we're not hiding anything. He said, if you didn't get the hint what my book's about, let me give it to you straight. He said, the world is undergoing immense changes. Certain established traditions are positively injurious and dangerous. That's why the preacher gets evaporated. This widening protest and conspiracy against established things would, by its very nature, go on in the daylight. It's an open conspiracy. He says, we're not hiding it. To take possession of the whole world, establishing a world order, it cannot fail to arouse enormous opposition. There's going to be preachers who are going to stand up and going to say, all of this is a judgment. But basically, people like me is who H.G. Wells and this whole original alien started the whole thing back in 1898. He's basically saying we got to get rid of the Bible because they believe this is demonic. People only want change when they're uncomfortable. Successful, comfortable people are disposed to dislike, obstruct, and even resist actively any substantial changes. But, by the way, H.G. Wells loved Franklin Rockefeller. And he loved what was coming to America. What brought on FDR and the Social Security to America? Was it because everybody was prospering? They were in the midst of a depression, right? So, H.G. Wells says, we learned that with animals long ago. You have to make them uncomfortable before you can get them to change in the way you want to change them. A world community is awakening. I have made a sort of provisional Bible, so to speak. All his writings, he said, they're kind of the Bible of what's going on. For some factors, at least, in the open conspiracy. This propaganda has to go on. It will be, frankly, a world religion. The old faiths are damaged and discredited, so his world religion is simply, we're evolving. Martians and higher powers are helping us in this evolution. And if you're one of those crazy, archaic, outdated, fundamental Christians, you're not going to make the next phase of evolution. You need to be evaporated and you need to disappear. In the American Magazine in 1934, H.G. Wells said, a world state is in the making. A time is coming when we will say, to the devil the parties and nations. They do not meet the needs and aims of this new humanity. The old faiths are damaged and discredited. What's he saying? We're going to have a one world government? We're not going to have borders? And he even wrote a book called The New World Order in 1940. He was ahead of his time, wasn't he? H.G. Wells in 1940 says, countless people will hate the New World Order and will die protesting against it. And he goes on to say, carrying weapons individually or in crowds calls for vigorous suppression on the part of the community. He says we must all get together as a community. We must take guns from people so we can bring about our New World Order. Those that go along with it will be patted on the back. Everything will be all right. If you resist it, you're going to be eradicated. Wells is quoted by Marilyn Ferguson's 1980 The Aquarian Conspiracy as one of the insiders to what they're trying to do in this New Age movement. Amen, y'all wait? So what happened then? Here you go. It's like a bomb being dropped. You've got Blavatsky and everything building up to the War of the Worlds. And then you have this fiction, but it's not really... he has teaching. He has a philosophy, an agenda behind his fiction. And the idea is we need to teach people evolution. We need to teach them that humanity is about to take a great big step, but there's people that are in the way. So what happened after that? Well, in the 1800s, with Westcott and Hort and their Ghost Society, people had turned to Ouija boards and seances and contacting their dead relatives like never before. From 1900 on, they got rid of trying to talk to their dead relatives, and everybody began to start trying to contact the UFO, the Martians. Popular Science magazine in May 1919 says, our message is coming from Martians frantically trying to communicate with us. Perhaps one might reason the Martians have had time to evolve into creatures intellectually far superior to ourselves. They are serious. So the popular science magazines began to publish literature and articles saying there are real Martians out there. Popular Science in 1930 says there's clear sign of man-like life on Mars, and it has been detected. Popular Mechanics in April 1933 says scientists now are agreed that there's life on Mars. What would it have been like to live there? 1933, you're at the door. FDR. I mean, all of this is happening in 1933. And then the Popular Science magazine says, oh yeah, all scientists believe in Martians. And then you have Hollywood and the comic books everywhere you look, fueling this outer space agenda. You've got to ask a question. To go to all this trouble, all these insiders involved in this whole alien conspiracy, you've got to ask a question. What's it all about? Well, at the heart of everything is the fact that devils literally are coming down to possess men and get in contact with mankind. That's just true. Just like in the days of Noah. There are obviously various layers of this. And the ultimate agenda is when you took those spiritualists or those spiritists and people were playing with Ouija boards and seances and everybody was gathering around, if you put the messages together, it was all consistent. The messages that these devils brought through the seances were all consistent. There is no judgment. We need to all hold hands and all religions come together. And we need to get rid of our division. Everything needs to be one world. Well, everybody gets excited about Martians to one degree or another. And what do the Martians begin to teach? People start saying, I have contact with Martians. We've made contact. Do you know, they say the exact same thing that the spiritualists in the 1800s were teaching. It's the same message. In fact, it's so obvious there was actually a government study to take all the messages of people that had contacted UFOs, supposedly, and the lady, the secretary, who had analyzed all that, says just about every one of these messages is the exact same thing you see in demonic possession. It's the same message. The devil doesn't care if he comes as your Aunt Betsy or whether he comes as a Martian. As long as you get away from the Bible and will listen to what he has to say. He doesn't care. It continues. 1934, Popular Mechanics. Intelligent beings could have been evolved earlier than life on Earth. Well, that's what Blavatsky taught. Placing the Martians today where Earthians will be 1,000,000 years hence. That's what H.G. Wells taught. So it's right here in your scientific magazines. Occultism, Luciferian doctrine. People say, well, I don't follow religion, I'll just follow science. You follow a bunch of Luciferians. You follow a bunch of devil worshippers. They don't realize that science has its own Bible. So-called science has its own experts, has its own agenda. It is possible that they have been signaling us for centuries, hoping the time would come when we would be intelligent enough to detect these signals. Am I reading out of a comic book? No, I'm reading the popular scientific magazines at the time. They have an agenda, people. Do you see it? Well, what's it all building up for? Do you think the comic books and Hollywood and all the popular scientific magazines are telling the people that there are Martians? We can get in touch with them if we haven't already done so? What is it all for? Well, let me ask you, what did H.G. Wells show? What was it all for? Well, it's building up to something. I'll show you what it's building up for. Halloween night, 1938. Orson Welles broadcasted. They tried it in the newspaper in the 1830s, and it worked, didn't it? Hey, let's try this with radio and see what will happen. Well, what are we going to broadcast for our test? Well, let's do our Bible. H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds. Actors played the news announcers. Officials, one would expect to hear in a news report. They began to enact some of the things out of War of the Worlds. It sounded so real that at least 1 million people actually believed and were frightened that Martians had really landed in New Jersey. Think, how could those people be so stupid? Hey, you use Crisco because an expert told you to do it. What do you mean? You wouldn't believe the things you do right now because a doctor told you to do it. And you wouldn't believe what most people in America would do if they turned on CNN and saw the world's experts all lined up saying, this is real, this happened. Hey, you believe they went to the moon, didn't you? I'm just kidding. Woo! You wouldn't believe what you'd believe. Amen? You believed everything else. 6 million people heard it. 1 million out of those 6 million believed it. Wow. Hadley Cantrell in the Invasion from Mars, a study in the psychology of panic in 1940, says Cantrell observed the economic unrest, insecurity, joblessness, coupled with blind faith in experts, and he believed all of that created the situation. He said, when you put all this together, you got to have experts that seem real, and you got to have the people in a state of joblessness and economic despair. And he said, it'll work. You put all those ingredients together, you can convince them. Dorothy Thompson of the New York Tribune says they have proved that a few effective voices, accompanied by sound effects, can convince masses of people of totally unreasonable, completely fantastic proposition as to create a nationwide panic. Isn't that amazing? Well, what did they do after 1938? They continued to unleash movies and control the minds of a generation. Comic books. Folks don't realize what it was like at that time for children to come home from school and run into their bedroom and grab those comic books and go out in the woods and just sit down and read that science fiction about the aliens and the Martians. And now they can surf the internet and watch the latest movie and do it every day. Back then they had to wait till Saturday to go get indoctrinated by Hollywood. Now they do it every day, every night, for hours. Well, what is all of this building up to? 1947, it all exploded when pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 unidentified objects. And that launched the modern UFO era and craze. I'm at the coffee store today printing off these notes a few hours before I came here tonight. And as I sat down, there was this person there, and she was strangely talkative. And she began to talk, and so I went ahead and had a conversation with her, and she goes, "Do you know where I'm from?" I said, "Where?" And she didn't know anything about my message tonight. She says, "I'm from Roswell, New Mexico." I said, "You are?" So that's interesting. She goes, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of doing a presentation on UFOs. I think they're demonic, you know." She goes, "You wouldn't believe the murders we have in Roswell." And she went on for 30 minutes to tell me about all the deaths and all the horrible things that happened in Roswell. And I said, "I never knew that." She goes, "Yeah, I grew up there, and you wouldn't believe what's happening." So I don't know what that's worth or why that happened, but it's just a little interesting tidbit tonight. 1963, I'll just skip over a little bit of the UFO craze. You know what happened in the 50s and everybody with the whole craze of UFOs. Popular Science magazine in 1963 says many scientists believe that canals on Mars are the last remnants of a great civilization. And what happened in the 60s? The moon race was ignited. But something strange about it. Led by Masons. Down there in the control board, 33-degree Mason. The astronauts that are up there, Masons, Masons, Masons. Why are they all Masons? And what really are Masons? Well, they're just like Blavatsky. It's all the same teaching. So we better go to the heart of all of this. I hope there's so much more, but I have to use the time wisely. I hope with all of this you can see the devil has a plan. And we need to ask, what is his plan? Well, it's revealed for you in the Bible, because the Bible has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness, right? Look at Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O who? Lucifer, son of the morning. How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." Who's interested in so-called outer space? Lucifer. He was the original one that said, "I'm not happy and content with the earth. I want heaven." And God cast him down. He became Satan. So what does he do to mankind? What does he do to mankind now? Don't you be content with earth. Don't you be content with earth. You need to turn your heart, your eyes toward the star. And if you don't think that's what he does, you just look at Genesis chapter 11. The whole earth was of one language and of one speech. That's what the devil wanted. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach where? Unto heaven." You know where that was at? Shinar. You know where that is at? Babylon. So here's the whole world gathered together in Babylon. And what are they doing? They're trying to get in touch with outer space. And what does God say? God says, when they're together like that, they just get so rebellious, they get in contact with devils, and nothing will be restrained from them. Why? Because the devils are going to show them how to do everything. So God says, I got to come down and judge them and divide them and separate them on the face of the earth. Because when they start coming together, they start communicating together like that, first thing they do is the devil teaches them to launch a space program. And what about all these Masonic astronauts? Well, the Telegraph in April 22nd, 2009 says aliens exist and UFOs are covered up by U.S. government, says ex-astronaut Edgar Mitchell. There really is no doubt we are being visited, Mitchell said. Telegraph, April 22nd, 2009. All right, just stop for a second. Here is a man, astronaut, famous astronaut, and he says there's no doubt about it. We've already been visited by aliens, and it's all just a government cover-up. Well, there's a lot of people sitting back, they say, yeah, I believe that we really did have aliens, and that government's covering it all up. You see that? Well, if they were visited by aliens, then what are they? Devils. They're devils. But I think this is part of a higher agenda. I don't really think NASA's all that upset about it. I think they're pretending to be upset. Because I think the whole goal is to get the people so consumed with the idea that we are contacting aliens because they're prepping everybody for the great event that's coming. Now, you remember Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon, supposedly. And he comes out and he says, yeah, we saw an UFO when we're flying up there. And then, of course, it all backtracks, and he gets on Larry King in 2007 and says, no, it just must have been a panel from the rocket, you know. And, well, what does that do? It excites everybody. Right? Look what he's saying. He's changing his story now. It is a cover-up. Look what he's doing. And that doesn't decrease the public fascination with all of this. It increases it. And then, of course, he gets on Alex Jones in 2009. And he downplays the Masonry connection. He reinforces the belief that the moon landing was legitimate. There are no real hard questions asked him. And even Alex Jones uses the opportunity to say, I know people that worked on the moon landing, and they've assured me that it was real. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what's going on there. But I'm telling you that every media source that is before the eyes of the people is being used to reinforce this idea that we are about to make alien connection, or we already have. John Keel was a famous UFO investigator. He wasn't a Christian, but he interviewed thousands of people. He was the writer of the Lost in Space episodes, some of that. He worked on a lot of things in Hollywood. And he spent his life working on investigating these UFO phenomena. And he finally says, I abandoned the extraterrestrial hypothesis in 1967 when my own field investigations disclosed an astonishing overlap between psychic phenomena and UFOs. He says, wait just a second. The messages that we're hearing from these UFO contact people are the same stuff we're hearing from devils. And he began to scratch his head and say, wait a second. So he wrote a book called UFOs, the Operation Trojan Horse in 1970. It was rejected by mainstream media, but here's what he said. The endless messages from the space people would now fill a library. And while the communicators claim to represent some other world, the contents of those messages are identical to the messages long received by mediums and mystics. The devils, demons, and false angels were recognized as liars and plunderers by early man. These same imposters now appear as Martians, people from other planets. Dabbling with UFOs can be as dangerous as dabbling with black magic. The Bible warns us that during the last days, this planet will be overrun with wonders in the sky and false prophets and performers of miracles. That's from a man that's not even a fundamental Christian. And he says, I spent my life studying all of this stuff, and I'm going to tell you, it's black magic. You need to stay away from it. You're going to get devil possessed. Of course, all the great movies, so-called great movies, began to come out using modern technology to make you think we had contacted UFOs. And you say, well, that's just entertainment, right? Not really. It's actually a religion. It's theosophy, occultism. These people on the street that say, I believe in UFOs, I believe in all this, they don't even realize they're playing with witchcraft. Science Digest in February 1978 says Close Encounters, the movie, is filled with a familiar religious awe that's tantamount to faith. And this faith, wondrous and thoroughly spiritual, is registered in nearly every frame, reaching a climax in its messianic ending. Hey, folks, they're building you up for a new worldwide religion. So you believe something beautiful has happened. We're about to become God. What did Satan tell Eve? You can be as God. You can be as gods. And whether you call it godhood or you call it the next evolutionary step, all of humanity is going to want to get involved. I want to be one of the evolved ones. I want to be one of these that make this transition to godhood. I want to be able to have these powers and this awareness and all of these things. And there's going to be a worldwide movement that says we're about to do it. We're about to take that step. But they're going to shake their head and they're going to say, but there's just something holding us back. There's negative vibration. What was that? It was an evaporation. People disappeared everywhere. Now people will just be in a state of chaos. And then they say we had to get rid of them. And we got to get rid of a lot more too. Everybody that will not take a step and evolve, you're going to have to be eradicated. And the Bible said so many people are going to die. It'll be such a state of persecution that the world has never seen it. And that if God didn't cut it short, there'd be no flesh saved. They'd kill everybody. Basically what Satan does is, under the guise of UFOs or evolution or whatever it is, he launches the greatest human sacrifice to himself that's ever been in all of history. I'm going to spare you decades of movies such as Close Encounters, but let's fast forward to 2012. Of course, I've never seen this trash. I'm just looking at a write-up. Prometheus is the movie that came out this year, directed by Ridley Scott. And guess what it's about? A team of scientists and astronauts go on a top-secret journey to contact an alien race. And what they learn from an advanced alien race is that all they are is evolved beings. And there's a Christian in the movie. How about that? There was a Christian in H.G. Wells' book also. But you found out that he was crazy and he had to be eradicated by the Martian. Well, what do you find out here? This Christian is not eradicated. Shaw is her name. But when she sees the message coming from the aliens that evolution's true and that all they are is evolved beings, she loses her faith in Jesus Christ. Welcome to modern Hollywood. Modern Hollywood. And the devil doesn't matter whether you deny Christ, repudiate Him, or just add the Martian right on there to Jesus. The director says, now by the way, I got all of this stuff from Chariots of the Gods in 1968. Same time they're supposedly going up to the moon, you got this book that all the hippies began reading, and most of the people smoking marijuana at the time, you look on their desk or their dresser, and there'll be this book, Chariots of the Gods. You say, what's this about? Well, it's about how we need to have a new attitude and how God was simply an astronaut. It's basically a bunch of Mormonism and that we're evolving and that we're going to make contact. And well, let's fast forward again. President Ronald Reagan, United Nations General Assembly, 1987. He says, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. What if you're facing an alien threat, but then you find out at the end, well, it was a threat, but actually it was a necessary component of our evolution, and we thought they were a threat, but they're really good. Paul Hellyer, what a name. Former Canadian Defense Minister. Says, decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about where we're headed and offered to help. But instead, we, or at least some of us, interpreted their visits as a threat. The veil of secrecy must be lifted. When President Clinton was asked about this, he replied, there's a government inside the government and I don't control it. You know what that does to the people? they begin to go crazy and they say, see, do you see what's going on? There's a conspiracy. We really have contacted aliens. And they think they're smart because they take another hit of their bong and then they say, I really think the government's covered up a whole bunch of stuff. Well, obviously. And I'm glad you're awake to that. But where the deception comes in, they begin to say, wow, I think we really did discover UFOs. I think we're already in touch with these things, and our government's hiding it. Every single area of our modern world is being touched by this doctrine. You know the place that Rome is going to play in all of this last days deception, Revelation 17. Well, New York Times, May 14, 2008, Vatican astronomer cites possibility of extraterrestrial brothers, perhaps more what? Evolved than humans. Same message. Martians are simply evolved humans. Pope Benedict's chief astronomer says the Catholic Church welcomes aliens. September 17, 2010. Highly evolved extraterrestrial life forms may be living in space and would be welcomed into the church. And he dismissed creationism. Oh, you know H.G. Wells. You got to get rid of those doom and gloom preachers that say it comes from the devil or that we're being judged by God. We dismiss creationism and we open the doors of the church to the aliens. If you really want to hang your head and weep, look at October 19, 2012, Huffington Post. Aliens now more popular than God. More people in the UK believe in aliens than in God, according to a new poll. Such a finding would have been unthinkable. How long ago? A few years ago. Hey, a lot's changed just in the past few years, hasn't it? It shows that UFOlogy could probably be regarded as a new religion. Where will it end? Well, I know where it will end. 52% of UK citizens think information about UFOs has been or would be covered up. So now we got more than half of people in the UK believe, oh yeah, we've been in contact with them, the government's. See, you're being primed. You're being primed. You're being primed. You're being set up. Space.com just a few days ago says the first alien Earth will be found in 2013. Who says so? The experts say so. You got to always follow the experts now. The first truly Earth-like alien planet is likely to be spotted next year. That's 2013. An epic discovery that would cause humanity to reassess its place in the universe. So they're all gearing up. We found a second Earth. We found our twin. Just a few days ago, Examiner.com, former British Defense Ministry UFO project leader Nick Pope has boldly predicted that aliens will reveal themselves to humans no later than 2024. It might even land on the White House lawn. Former British Defense Minister. That's when the largest telescope in history will go online. The SKA telescope is the most ambitious ever planned. So just in the last few days, they've been pumping this UFO alien contact, priming you for 2013 and some amazing things to occur. Now, the conclusion in all of this is twofold. Number one conclusion, if you're a sober, reasonable person based upon all this in history and what you've already seen in recent times, we may expect more staged events. And it's important not to be deceived by them. Always look at what's the agenda. What is the agenda? Why do they want... And look at the media outlets. See, YouTube, folks, isn't underground. I'm sorry. YouTube is now mainstream media. Do you understand? I've been kicked off YouTube. And I'm not saying there's no truth on YouTube. Just understand that if they're allowing it on YouTube, you always got to ask the question, they either haven't found it or they want you to find it. The important thing is, of course, to not be deceived. What does it say in 2 Thessalonians 2? Even him, the Antichrist, who's coming, is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. But don't miss verse 11. For this cause, because they didn't want the truth, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. And what if the devil has a lie for whatever group you happen to be in? The ultimate lie is that you can be God. And whether you want to go the occult New Age way, whether you want to go the evolution way, whether you want to say God is about to give us the gifts of the Holy Ghost or we're going to have the greatest revival ever in history, it doesn't matter. The devil will give you whatever flavor of Kool-Aid you want. You like grape? You like raspberry? It doesn't matter. But he'll give you your lie. The ultimate thing is for you to believe bad people just disappeared. And I'm part of a special club of humanity that's about to get blessed. Now we got another problem. If half of the UK believes the government lied about UFOs, and Zeitgeist is put out by a bunch of communists showing that 9/11 buildings are all fake, or the whole thing was a staged event, that's mainstream. We need people on the streets doing drugs, partying, that are watching Zeitgeist that say, I don't believe in God, but I believe our government's part of a great conspiracy. What I'm trying to do for you right now is get you to understand something. I have no doubt they're staged events, many of them. But what happens when so many people around the world have been led to believe that they're smart and that they understand the government scams, and information begins to be unleashed to prepare you to believe that there's about to be a rapture staged event? What happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. The rapture happens just like Jesus said it's going to happen. But you've got thousands all around the world that say, you're not fooling me. You're not fooling me. As they turn on AC/DC and jam out and they say, you're not fooling me. I know that wasn't those are the best. That's a government staged event. And of course, you're going to have the little New Agers singing in the streets, the earth is cleansing itself, the earth is cleansing itself. And then you're going to have the conspiracy dudes walking around. That was a government, that was DARPA, that was the HARP, that was this, that was whatever. But everybody's going to be on the same page. It was not a real event. Or if it was a real event, it was a good thing that those bad people have been eradicated off the earth. This is scary, folks. This is scary. You said, if that's true, then the devil, he's just evil. I mean, that's just a layer of deception. I mean, that's just, well, I know. You said, but wait, that's just twisted. Hey, he's a twisted snake, isn't he? He's got a forked tongue. Well, let's see what the New Agers are saying right now. Because they claim to be devil-possessed. They might not call it a devil, but they say, I got a spirit guide. And I say, well, what did that spirit guide tell you? Just like parasites on a body, Mother Earth will soon cleanse herself. I said, oh, yeah. So you think the bad people are about to disappear off the planet? They say, yes. Yes. Here's John Randolph Price. Practical Spirituality. Writing through a devil named Asher, who he says speaks through him. I wonder what Asher has to say. I already know. I already know what Asher has to say. So let's read it. Nature will soon enter her cleansing cycle. I thought so. These individuals with their lower vibratory rates will be removed during the next 2 decades. Yeah, I thought so. Because the next great event is the rapture. The next great event is when Jesus takes the Enochs off of this earth. So, the devils are already preparing for it by giving you an answer for it. Because you know what would happen if they didn't provide you with an answer? When that rapture happened, you know what would happen? There would be a worldwide turning to God like never before in history. So the devil has to put things in place so when it happens, you'll already have a mechanism with the answer. If you think that's bad, look at Barbara Marks Hubbard, high priestess of the New Age, writing through devil possession, claims to be possessed by spirits. She says humanity will not be able to make the transition. Well, what transition? I remember what H.G. Wells said, that preacher, he didn't make the transition. What transition are you talking about? Until the chaff has been separated from the wheat. The great reaper must reap before we can take the quantum leap to the next phase of evolution. Well, that's right out of Madame Blavatsky. Evolution is good, but it's not nice. Oh, I see. What happened to... can I ask you a question? Mrs. High Priest of the New Age, will you ask your devil that's speaking through you? I just got a question. I saw people disappear right before my eyes. Can you tell me what happened? They were evaporated. Evaporated? He was a nice fella. Well, that's just not very nice. Evolution's not very nice. This stuff had to happen. It had to happen. They had to go. We got to visualize world peace, and they're giving you negative energy. Be prepared for the selection process, which is now beginning. We, the elders, have been patiently waiting until the very last moment. The elders are the devils that are speaking through her. They've been patiently waiting to bring this thing about. The selection process will be quick. We are the riders of the pale horse. Another devil-possessed lady, Barbara Marciniak, Bringers of the Dawn, says the people who leave the planet during the time of earth changes do not fit in here any longer. And they are stopping the harmony of the earth. When the time comes, perhaps 20 million people will leave the planet at one time, and there will be a tremendous shift in consciousness for those who are remaining. Connecting Link Magazine, 1994, says the mother is cleansing. Many have appointments to leave at this time to bring forth the necessary changes. So you're going to have most of the world looking at the rapture and interpreting it as Mother Earth cleansing herself. But everybody's not going to immediately buy that. You're going to have a large part of the world that's going to believe something else. They'll think it's a government conspiracy. Because just as the New Agers are already being primed for the rapture, so's most of the world right now in other ways. For example, you could go to YouTube, Illuminati's Sandy Hook Nightmare. And as whoever it is, explains that Sandy Hook was a staged event, then goes on and says, okay, what was that just happened? It was the rapture? Hey, if they stage a fake rapture and all your children disappear, you guys need to wake up. That's the true plot. What's she saying? They're saying the conspiracy is higher than this. They're about to fake a rapture. Alex Jones, May 20th, 2011, which has a lot of good stuff. Thankful for many of the things he exposes. But when it comes to these theological things, he needs more discernment. He says Freemasonry created the rapture. This was never taught. Not in Greek Orthodox or the Catholic Church. Well, neither was the second coming of Christ. Neither was the coming of Antichrist. Neither was any of these things that the Bible... They weren't Bible literalists. That's why they didn't believe any of these things. He says, or by Protestants. Protestants thought they were in the Great Tribulation and that it was a figurative 3.5 years, and there was a lot of light that needed to come about. But what he says is a giant cop-out. And I'm not here saying that Masons are bad and evil. Why not? This whole thing of being beamed up to the teleporter room. When Jesus says, oh, guess what, my flock? You don't have to go through any tribulation. They're telling you you don't have to face evil. Now let me explain something. This is very important. It's very important. I want you to listen. Nowhere in the Bible does it teach that the rapture is for the sole purpose of escaping affliction. And any preacher that says you don't have to have any persecution or affliction, he's a liar. Christians have been persecuted and afflicted down through the ages. You say, well, what's the rapture about? Well, it'll certainly save you from great affliction that's coming, the worst in all of history. But the rapture is about escaping deception. And every humble person will say, I don't want to be here in the midst of that deception. So it's humble. What did Jesus tell His disciples to do when He went to pray in the garden? Watch and pray that you enter not into what? Temptation! And what did they decide to do? They slept instead of prayed. And what happened? Every one of them denied Jesus Christ. Jesus tells you, watch and pray that you might escape all these things that are coming. It's going to be the worst time of temptation, the worst time of deception the world has ever seen. If you're a humble person, you'll say, you know what? I'm a follower of Jesus Christ and I love Him and I want to do right. But Lord, I don't want to be here during such a time. I'm weak and I'm more gullible than I really even know. I deceive myself and I'm liable to be deceived in the midst of all of this. Lord, account me worthy to escape, please. I don't want to be here during that time. And if you want me to stand for you, I'll stand. I'll face whatever if you'll give me the strength. But Lord, I pray you just get me and my family out of here. Another YouTube writer, video, says, please be aware of the false rapture they're planning when someone projects his face, a hologram in the sky. Then there's somebody that calls herself the bride of Yahushua. I don't know who that is. I guess it's supposed to be Jehovah God. You know, people love to play with that Y, don't they? They call Him Yahweh this, Yah this, and they say, it's not Jesus, there was no letter J, you know, it's not Jehovah, you have to, it's the Y, it's the Y. But they don't do that with Jerusalem or Judah or any other words in the Bible that start with a J, you know. And she, notice, is not just any normal Christian. She's the bride of Yahushua. And you know what? She believes Yahushua speaks through her. This is the Christian, so-called, charismatic wing of the deception. What does she say? Through automatic writing from Yahushua. The false blue beam rapture. Jehovah said, and this is supposedly God talking, I warned you a long time ago, Elizabeth, not to name this ministry after a man. The rapture will be Satan coming in disguise. For now my weapons will mow you down. They will be evaporated. Nothing but smoke. My son will come to you where you are. Warn them. Warn them. Warn them. And I'm telling you right now, that's a devil. As sincere and kind and sweet as she may be, that is a devil that's speaking through her. That is not Jehovah God. And that devil that is speaking through her is saying the rapture, people will be evaporated, but they were bad people that were left. That were gone, I mean. The truth is, according to Jehovah God, which she calls Jehovah, which is not God, is that never ever expect Jesus in the sky. Look for Him where? Where you are. Now wait a second. That tricky devil just turned Jesus' words upside down. Because Jesus said, don't look for Him on the earth. You'll get the wrong one. Look for Him the same place lightning is shining. Where's lightning shining? Up in the sky. Jesus said in Matthew 24, wherefore if they shall say unto you, behold, He is in the desert. Where's that at? That's down here, isn't it? Go not forth. Behold, He is in the secret chambers. What do? Believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even to the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Where does the lightning shine at? In the sky, in the clouds. Where does the Bible, Jesus said, the same way I left, in the clouds, I'm coming again. And He's going to catch you up. Where? To the clouds. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. All right, if you got a bunch of eagles that are carnivorous, and you got a carcass, where do the eagles gather together at? Wherever the body is. Correct? All right? So wherever Jesus is at, that's where the eagles will be gathered together. And guess where He's going to be? In the clouds. In the clouds. Then two shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. And immediately on YouTube and all on CNN and all over the place, they're going to be interviewing various folks. The New Agers are going to say Mother Earth is cleansing herself. Whoever was taken was bad, and they had to be taken off the planet or the earth. And then there's going to be some other folk. They're going to say, I think it was a government conspiracy. It's Project Bluebeam. I don't even think what. And then you're going to have other folks that are going to say, God, Jehovah, or whoever this is, has already warned us that the bad people will be evaporated. Now let me tell you something. I do believe when Jesus comes in the rapture, there are going to be some Christians in a lot of trouble, and they are going to get... But guess what? The unbeliever is going to be left here. And the lukewarm Christian, I believe, will be left behind. I believe he's saved in eternity. But if a farmer goes out into his garden, or let's say he goes up to his peach tree, and he sees a rotten peach, what's he do? He plucks it. And if he sees a green peach, what does he do? He leaves it to ripen in the sun. So what type of Christian are you?